then here we have the, real estate location. The fantastic cafe here.
The $1 pizza?
Well, cafe where they sit on a plastic crate.
Those guys, yes, they've got their furniture over there, yeah. Well, I mean, Charles, at least we don't have 16,000 fecal complaints. I think that's relegated to San Francisco. Charles, it's almost Christmas, but it feels like spring. I was going to go suntanning earlier today.
Exactly.
Seriously.
Beach bum tanning.
I mean, it was, on the roof.
Oh, wow.
It was 55 degrees. I was out around lunchtime. But, I tell you, Charles, we've been working on this Clinton Foundation investigation.
What's that?
Well, I mean, it's been over 2 years, right?
It's been almost 3 years.
Right. And you've been on it even longer.
Right.
And it's almost Christmas. And I feel like we should do something special this Christmas, Charles. Maybe like a Christmas special?
That's just a lot of work, Jason. I don't know. I mean,
but we
have to renegotiate my rates.
Exactly. But we want people to have something nice and special for Christmas.
But that's so much work for the art department, the video department, and
the subscription department, the fulfillment department.
All the departments will be active.
Yeah, I guess and unemployment's really low.
Now
you have to pay these people overtime.
Exactly. Now, the other thing is, Charles, I was thinking, James Comey is having a really rough Christmas. Everybody is scrutinizing him.
So we should try to figure out how to make it even rougher?
Well, hey, look at that.
That's Fox News Network.
Right. What do they got in there?
Fox in a box.
Fox in a box. I wonder.
They probably got somebody. Maybe they got Jesse Waters roaming around.
Looks like broadcast stuff up on the roof there.
They could well be doing man on the street interviews up here.
Maybe we could go interview them about interviewing people.
We could. Actually, I was there for Hillary Clinton's first book. Not what happened, the one before that, Hard Choices. That ridiculous. I'll keep it clean. That ridiculous piece of shit.
I think she should write a book called Hard Time.
Doing Hard Time.
Exactly.
My married life with Bill. But anyway, so we were there at Barnes & Noble, and there was a Ready for Hillary bus out front. This was in 2014, so well before she'd announced. And Jesse Waters was there, doing just that, interviewing the knuckleheads who would stand in line to pay money for a Hard Time or Hard Choices, or whatever that book is.
Right.
And so we got talking to Jesse. He's a nice guy. He's a bit full of himself, I think, at this point. But
somebody told me a story about him that I won't share because I'm not privy to it, but it wasn't that nice.
Yeah.
But the thing I wanted to say, unless there's more to that story,
no.
Jesse Waters, I'm sure he's a great guy.
Yeah.
But James Comey's going to have a rough Christmas, Charles. I thought maybe we could pick out some Legos for him.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
We're pretty close to the Lego store. Last Sunday when we were looking on Google Earth at the Lego store, it seemed like kind of an outdated photo of it. I do always like to show people the World Trade Center down there.
Yeah.
It's a nice view, the sun's setting. Although I really don't like that World Trade Center. I like the first one.
I like the pool, reflecting pool. It's very beautiful, very moving. Actually, when you stand down there and you see the people reaction to it.
Well, right, but it's a Masonic. Ole Damagard and I did a whole show about that. How it's that negative pool, that infinity. It's a hypercube. That's what it is.
Is it really?
Yeah. And it's Masonic symbology.
And here's the.
Smells like Christmas, doesn't it, Charles?
It does. Here's the Sit on the Box program.
Yeah, Christmas in Jamaica, perhaps.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. That's bad. Kamala Harris's father is going to send me a letter. Look at this dog, Charles.
That's a dog.
He's got a cool outfit.
That's a support dog.
That looks like a dog that will eat you.
Yeah, that's right. It looks like a dog that has eaten people.
Yeah.
But this, where we're going for people who don't know New York well, this, when I moved to New York back full time in 1980 from business school, where we're going now is a wasteland.
Oh, really?
The Madison Park was unsuccessful as a park, and it failed as a park. No grass, trees were dying, hobos were everywhere.
Democrats were running it.
And then they, in the long time since now, 39 years, this area has boomed.
Oh yeah.
It was really not good.
Right. Well, actually, that Madison Square Park got a pretty substantial renovation when they made the movie Spider-Man 2, because there was a scene in it where Kirsten Dunst is running through the park, and it got a huge investment, I guess, from the movie company, and that's when they put, what's the hamburger place?
Shake Shack.
Yeah, that's when they put Shake Shack in there. And I'm pretty sure that was the first Shake Shack. It's an actual shack.
Yeah, and well, actually, what really I think may have improved the area is when Credit Suisse First Boston decided to move into the area. There were a whole bunch of insurance companies that exited these big office buildings, and this used to be, late at night it was just streetwalkers, drug dealers. Very few people actually lived here.
I think the audience will enjoy the things that you notice as the indicators of change versus me. For me, it's Spider-Man. For you, it's Credit Suisse.
Well, yeah, we're coming up in late 81, early 82. That building on your right there, the cream-colored one, that has before the big new fancy ones, that was going up, and I was going to be the first person to buy a condo in that building.
Wait, this one right here?
No, there.
Oh, yes, on the corner.
Yeah, and I remember there was a young woman then, her last name was Sunshine, which I doubt is a real name, but it's now a very big marketing operation, the Sunshine Group. And I went and looked at it a bunch of times, top floor, I was thinking about should I buy one, should I buy two? And I was about to I had money ready, about to do it, and I said, we're up here on the top. This is the site of that fire, that famous fire.
Oh, the triangle shirt?
Right there.
I thought that was 721 Broadway.
I thought, well, it's right near here, I think. Anyway, and so I said, what happens if there's a fire? I'm buying an apartment on the top floor of this building.
You burn.
No, the woman said, don't worry, the building's fireproof.
Right.
Here's, look, CBS.
So what's going on here? Everyone is coming here to buy Legos for James Comey.
Maybe, let's look.
Unbelievable.
Could be Italy.
Yeah, I do like Italy, I have to say. Mario Battaglia looks closed, though.
Italy is open.
Is it?
Right
oh, yeah, it is. It just looks dark in the vestibule. All right, so we're right
What's
here.
our budget for the Lego purchase for Mr. Comey?
Well, here, let's show everybody the Lego store. I don't know. I mean, I was thinking maybe they'd want to donate, for all of his service to the country. We should ask them, will you donate to the James Comey Lego Foundation? And see if
I'll let you do the talking.
I'm pretty sure this is like the main Lego
store. That says
store.
exit only.
Yeah, no, the entrance is over there. But this is, I'm pretty sure, the main Lego store for New York City, as far as I know. It's
pretty cool, actually.
There is another one in Rockefeller Center.
This is the downtown Lego store.
That one's smaller, though. This is somebody. So check this out, Charles. James Comey. This would keep him occupied until 2020.
Well, for James Comey, this is what, a Millennium Starfighter? Or
this is the Star Destroyer. Yeah, Star Destroyer. Imperial. It's hard to find. It's according to this, but it appears to be right in front of us, so I don't know what they're talking about. I found it right there. Oh, look, Charles, it's capturing Princess Leia's ship as well. That's from the beginning of the very first Star Wars. This has got to. I bet you this is $1,000 or something crazy.
It probably is. I think that's above the budget.
That's outside the James. What about Batman? Perhaps James Comey. Well, he likes Star Wars toys. I don't know if he likes Batman quite as much.
Well, I'm sure we'll look around. We'll see stuff that looks interesting.
Wait, they have James Comey right there, Charles, the Joker. Well, I'm sure they'll kick us out if we attempt to film inside the Lego store. But
so shall we not film inside?
We could try it. We could try it. Do we
just start speaking Russian? I don't.
Yeah, I don't know.
Understand.
We don't really want to No, we better not because it's invading people's privacy inside there. But that's the Lego store for people who wanted to.
And there's the Christmas tree.
Yeah, let's go over to the Christmas tree. So, but Charles, what we're going to do right now. This is not the Christmas special. This is
really? You lured me here under false pretenses?
Well, this could be part of the Christmas special, We'll plan something. What about? Where is that Christmas tree? Oh, there it is. There it is.
It's next to your Shake Shack.
Yeah,
Get a Christmas tree.
I've never
and fries.
eaten at that Shake Shack.
It's overpriced. It smells good. It must put a lot of, I don't know, whatever smells good into it, but it's packed. All of them are packed.
Well, that's the reason why I've never eaten there. Every time I go by it, the line is reminiscent of the line to see Star Wars in 1977, just totally unmanageable. It's remarkably warm, given that it's
it's global warming. AOC was right.
Christmas time and right, AOC, exactly. We actually had an episode, Charles, of Light on Conspiracies with Ole Damagard, where he brought on a Swedish scientist friend of his who
debunked.
Has been talking about how it all is coming from Rockefeller research and how, people should watch the episode. I'm not doing it justice, but there you go, Charles. There's the Christmas tree.
Or what is that? What do they call it? An entertainment bush?
I've never heard that before. But you mean to be politically correct? Oh, well,
there it is.
Yeah, no line. That's interesting. There it is. So for some reason in this park, we get radio interference on our microphones, but this is kind of nice. People can see the Christmas tree and the Empire State Building.
It's very nice, Jason. I think what you should do, since you're so good at this, I think you should round up a whole bunch of your frequent guests and whatever, and put together a show.
Maybe like we could get Dr. Corsi and Kevin Shipp and the Moriartys.
It would take a lot of work.
David Hawkins, and we could have a very Corsi Christmas, Charles.
That's an idea. I don't know if you have enough time to get it done.
Well, let's see if we can do it.
All right.
Dr. Corsi, thank you so much for inviting us to your home here. It's a very Corsi Christmas.
Well, thank you. Merry Christmas to everyone. It's great to have you, Jason, and Charles joining us. Thank you for coming here and looking forward to the broadcast today.
Absolutely, Doctor. And we've got a sequence of special guests that we've lined up. The first person joining us is former CIA officer Kevin Shipp. Kevin, hello.
Hey, Jason. That's a recovering CIA officer.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's good.
Sorry.
Good to be with all you guys.
Merry Christmas, Kevin.
Merry Christmas to you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, and we haven't done that many shows with this diverse crew, so it's nice to get everybody to meet each other and speak to each other. Kevin, I wonder, is there anything in particular you think that happened in 2019 or that you expect in 2020 that would be a good topic to discuss with Charles and the doctor and myself and to pose to the audience?
Well, it's, as we all know, it's been a pretty cataclysmic year, especially this year. And as you all know as well as I do, we've witnessed a literal soft coup against the sitting president of the United States. And of course, the voters that put him there. But what is shocking, some of us have been warning about for some time, is that this involved our CIA, NSA, and FBI and British intelligence, which is absolutely shocking. And I've been talking about the shadow government deep state for some time, but this is so expansive. This has never happened in really U.S. history or global history, for that matter. And you and I have talked about this, and to make it even worse, we've seen the mainstream news media would essentially become the propaganda arm of the DNC and progressive globalism. And we did a program on the exact tactics of propaganda that our own mainstream media is using, CNN, MSNBC, The Post, and others. Which is one of the most disconcerting things about this, that our own press is no longer the press, it used to be 30, 40 years ago. So when that coup failed, we saw a second attempt. You could call this Russia collusion or soft coup 2.0, but they hatched another falsity, and that was the impeachment trial or the kangaroo court that we've had to endure for a few weeks now by, I guess, what you could call Congress now. So we've seen the tentacles of the progressive movement, global progressivism, spread really into the heart of our own government. And that's very alarming. It's very disconcerting. And up until now, this deep state we talk often about, it's for 50 years or so, it's been manipulating our elected government, all three branches, but it's been able to kind of hide in secret all this time and up until now. And for the first time in our history, we're seeing the deep state's been forced right out into plain view where everybody can see it. And we're seeing it, those of us that don't stick to airport news, we're seeing it almost daily in plain view before us and what's going on. So that's real gratifying to see for me for the first time. And I know some of you guys to actually see the deep state being split open for people to see. So, but in the coming year, you guys, and Jason, we're going to have to remain even more vigilant. We all wish we could stop. We can't. This assault on our Constitution and freedoms is just going to get worse, and we've got to be ready for that. But I think the good news is the progress that we have made, thanks in large part to Donald Trump, who is the first president I've seen confront the deep state shadow government like this in our history since JFK, but even more than JFK ever did. So I'm convinced we can successfully oppose what is coming, but it's going to take a lot of work, and frankly, it's going to take a lot of guts.
Yeah.
And I just want to close with this, at least for my portion of this, just from my personal point of view. The things that I've seen humbly from the belly of the beast and operations in war-torn countries and different places around the world, and people from all walks of life, I found really that there's only one thing that really matters, I think, that really makes a difference. And it's the only thing that makes a difference in our hearts, the hearts of men, and then their towns, and then their cities, and then their governments. And that one thing, I think, is enduring, and that's a faith in a creator greater than ourselves, the love of our families, the trust of our friends, and a deep love for our freedoms. And as you all, I'm sure, will agree, this is what makes what we're doing worth it. So I want to wish all you guys and your viewers a peaceful, restful, joyous Merry Christmas on behalf of your humble correspondent at a studio somewhere deep in the southern United States. So Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas, Kevin. Very well said.
Yeah, and Kevin, I think one of the great, I guess, positives of the past year has been that Donald Trump has forced the deep state in the open. I mean, this Trump derangement syndrome, the Democratic Party has been moving in a socialist or communist direction since the 1950s, when the Communist Party of the United States decided that it wanted to take over the Democrats. That's how it was going to succeed.
Right.
And now we see it. I mean, you can't. Nancy Pelosi's being driven by AOC and the leftist wing, and we have seen 2 coups. Charles, you want to comment as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing I'm curious, Kevin, you know the CIA well, and I don't know anything really about the CIA, but I wonder what you would say to the viewership about how worried John Brennan should be now that we learned recently that the I think great patriot Admiral Rogers has been cooperating with the Durham investigation. Should John Brennan be able to enjoy a Merry Christmas?
Yeah. Hi, Charles. No, John Brennan, I am sure, has got grave concern about what is coming in these investigations regarding him personally. He's clearly broken the law. We know that he spied on the Senate about the torture report. We know he's lied under oath at least twice. He lied under oath about the drone program, and now he is the central focus of this soft coup and the Russian dossier, which John Brennan put it in the intelligence assessment as if it was intelligence, and then leaked it to the news media. That is seditious behavior. So, Charles, I think John Brennan, this is probably not a very good Christmas season for him.
Yeah, the concern I've got is that the deep state still has a tremendous capacity for covering up and the institutional bias is to keep the institution going. So you see, even with Horowitz's last report is clearly aimed at being, you read the report, the body of the report, and I thought, Lindsey Graham did a great job in the hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee. Even Barr in his statements, and Durham, the limited statement that he made when the Horowitz report on FISA abuse was released. Yet even Horowitz glosses it over by saying that the political bias was not involved in opening Crossfire Hurricane, the FBI counterintelligence investigation against Donald Trump, or that in fact he didn't find that there were, except for this Kleinsmith who actually altered a CIA memo, it was very forgiving at the top level. When you looked at what was done, when you read the body of the report, it's obvious there were illegalities all over the place in lying to the FISA court. But at least we've got that now, and we've got to keep the pressure on, I think, through this next year in order to get some accountability. And what are your thoughts on? Do you think we will get any accountability, or do you think? I've been saying that the only solution is to move the deep state out of Washington, put the State Department in the Aleutian Islands, and see how many of these, these Beltway, Georgetown coffee shop types are willing to leave and go up the Aleutian Islands. It's the only way we can get,
popping champagne works. I can tell you that.
Put the IRS in the Mojave Desert, and put put the EPA by Dalhart, Texas, right next to the feedlots. We can move them all out of Washington.
No, you all probably know by now, I'm real skeptical about Washington getting anything done in regards to important constitutional issues like this. We just heard just recently this past week that Joseph Mifsud, according to the Italian government, is dead. Now, it's like Epstein didn't kill himself. So one of the senior spies in this whole soft coup against Donald Trump now is allegedly, according to the Italian government, turns up dead. And we knew the Horowitz report was going to be a bit of pablum. Although there is dramatic instances of criminal activity all through that.
Yes.
There's 17, but actually there's more like 21, 22. And I think your point is right on target, Dr. Corsi. We hear these big impassioned speeches, formerly from Trey Gowdy and now from Lindsey Graham, and then what happens is nothing. And historically, that's been the case in Washington. Is it going to change now? Well, there's only one different ingredient, and that's Donald J. Trump. But he's surrounded by a multi-tentacled monster, and I'm not holding my breath to see some of the indictments that need to be handed down. I think there will be I think Brennan will be one, but no, I think we need to keep the pressure on Washington because they're going to try to wiggle out of this.
Yeah, and I think ironically, the best thing would be if they continue to try to get Donald Trump, because it'll continue with more and more ridiculous Ukraine gates. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do next, but they'll find something. And clearly, I think the American people can see it. I mean, the optics, as I watched the hearings, the House Intelligence Committee and then the House Judiciary Committee, I don't think you could find two worse people to put on TV from a public relations point of view than Schiff and Nadler.
Laurel and Hardy.
Oh no, Jabba the Hutt, and
and Humpty Dumpty, and Pencil Neck,
a guy who made he made Jack Parr. If people remember the old days, he made Jack Parr look normal. And so the only thing that I rely on, I think, is there. What you said earlier, I think all through history there's been an attempt to have an oligarchy or a ruling class. So it's really only a few hundred years, exceptionally, the American Constitution has been a turning point in as it were, the deep state control over human beings, going back with a king or an oligarchy or a fiefdoms and all the rest of it, the knighthoods and all the other distinctions to keep a ruling class and everybody else subjugated. But in the heart of a human being, God still exists, and you can't extinguish it. And that's what has been throughout history, it's been that impulse, that understanding that we're only here for a short time, and that, especially on Christmas, remembering and, the admonitions, that it does, what does it gain you to gain the world and lose your soul? That still is fundamental.
Yeah.
And if we continue that spirit, that's why I say in the end, God always wins. I mean, in the end, God created all this. The day he pulls the plug, guess who gets to judge? It's not going to be John Brennan, I can guarantee you.
Yeah.
Well said, Dr. Corsi.
I couldn't agree with you more. And without, and some of the original founders wrote about this, without a belief in a creator and that will answer to a higher authority, human behavior is a Pandora's box. And that's why we're seeing this insanity, these reprobates that are coming out and teaching transgender issues to kids in the third grade. So belief in a creator, so well put by the founders and even in our documents, is critical because it is a check on human behavior, without which, as I just said, Pandora's box of dark and reprobate activities happens. We're seeing that in the United States. We've thrown God out of government. We've thrown him out of the schools. And I'm talking about a deep, real faith in God, which we have. completely thrown out of our society now. And that vacuum is being filled with this darkness that we're seeing with these insane things of men wanting to compete or actually competing in women's track meets and on and on and on the craziness goes. But so belief in a creator and in answering to a high authority is not only the source of truth, but it's also a tremendous check on what mankind does.
In that spirit, I mean, I think it's often said the Founding Fathers created a document for a moral people that believed in God.
Right.
The other side of that is they also created the Constitution for failed human beings that suffered from original sin and are prone, let alone to commit all kinds of horrendous sins. So the Constitution was designed to make it hard for any one group in government. That's the whole genius of the balance of powers, the checks and balances, which we don't teach anymore in schools, but is fundamental to the fact that it's very hard in the American political system to get anything done unless you've got the cooperation of all three bodies, the legislative, judicial, and the executive. Any one can block the other two. Mm-hmm. And our Founding Fathers did that because they knew the horrendous things that could be done if any one party got a control.
That's right. Yeah.
I hate to think what would happen if the Democrats now had the majority in the Senate. They wouldn't hesitate. They'd remove Donald Trump from office.
Yeah, they'd have those papers right over there.
Exactly.
The articles would be right over there.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today. Merry Christmas.
Thank you, guys. Thanks to all of you. Merry Christmas to all of you.
It's been a great 2019, and thanks so much for being a part of it with all of us.
We look forward to working with you throughout 2020.
Absolutely.
I think it's going to be vital we stay together and continue working together, producing information and sharing it with the American people.
Absolutely.
You bet. Absolutely.
Merry Christmas, Kevin. We'll
God
see
bless.
you soon.
Merry Christmas, guys. All righty.
Take care of yourself. Well, Charles, Dr. Corsi, we've got a number of guests lined up for today. Let me bring the next one on here. From Texas, Jimmy and JoAnne Moriarty. How you guys doing? Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, you guys, and Happy Hanukkah.
Absolutely.
Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah.
Thank you.
Good to be with you.
And I'm just
Great to be with you.
It's a beautiful tree you've got there, and I think people know that Jimmy and JoAnne have done quite a bit of work with Dr. Corsi. Isn't that right?
Quite a bit. We did a lot of reporting out of Libya, and I'm glad to see that the FBI isn't there today.
Yeah.
I'd rather have the Christmas tree than the FBI in your home. I mean, they did come and visit you, right? They did it through the Mueller thing. Had two of them or whatever came to your door and knocked on it and wanted to interview you about me.
Yes.
Armed. Yeah, armed.
Yeah, they were armed.
Yeah.
Were they cordial or were they nasty?
Oh, he was cordial.
I was as nasty as I could be. I was my typical self.
Jimmy was beat him up real bad, but he came with the sheriff here, and we know the sheriff real well. Big, tall guy, and he said I only came because I was promised lunch, but he tried to get the what was it? The other guy, the constable, to go with him, and we know the constable. He's actually the hair conditioning guy here. And he came to our house. He said, I turned him down because he said, this is a joke.
He said, when I got the email from him and I found out what they wanted, I told him I'm not going to be a party to it. And I said, well, thank you.
They interviewed you each separately? They took you apart and interviewed you separately and then interviewed you together? Is that what they did?
Yes.
Well, I gave him 3 hours, Jerry, of all the information we had out of Libya. I gave him a copy of our DVD, and I said, according to the MOU you've got with all the intelligence agencies, you're to report upstream all the way to the White House if you're informed of experienced present danger. And you remember all the copies of the passports that we got issued out of Syria and issued out of Libya to those PI trainees in Libya?
Yes, I remember. Let's just give the context so everybody watching. And I guess it was right after the Hillary had her little coup d'etat and deposed Gaddafi, and he was murdered. You guys were chased out of the country. I was reporting for World Net Daily, and you guys contacted me, and we had a source who was in Egypt who had fled out of Libya, and we were reporting on the Benghazi before the attack. We were reporting on all the arms trading that Hillary Clinton was doing with illegal weapons being brought in to Libya and then shipped to Turkey and ultimately ending up in Syria. The tribes and how the tribes were being infiltrated by militias. And what the FBI was confident we had to do is they wanted you to talk about Assange, right? They wanted my context with Julian Assange, which I didn't have. And were they shocked to know that our sources weren't Assange? They couldn't probably believe it.
What they said was, "You're sure he didn't mention that? Do you have any recordings of what he said to you?" And I said, "No." And I said, "Actually, Dr. Corsi is very thorough about vetting everything, and he never gave me information. I gave him information."
Right. Our source was, the source that we had in Egypt. It had nothing to do with Assange.
We can say, yeah. Dr. Mufta's been on with Jason and us a couple times. He is now, Jerry, he's head of the International Human Rights Commission in Libya.
Is he really? Is he back in Libya?
He's doing great.
He was on just last week. Yeah. He was in Egypt last week.
Was he on your show?
He was in Egypt.
Well, I hope you'll say hello to him for me. I mean, he was great. I tried to do everything I could for the people of Libya to get freedom back for the tribes, try to save lives. And I think we managed to do some of that. And I think
we did. And let me tell you, the Libyan people, the tribes have great respect for you. They always ask me how you are. They really, really have a love for you, for what you did for them.
We told Mufta we were going to be with you today, and he said he wanted to speak for the Libyan people and thank you very much for all your efforts. He wants to remind you that you're still on that special committee in Libya. And Jason, for your information, Jerry wrote over 50 articles about with information that the tribe provided through JoAnne to him, and so he did absolutely a stalwart amount of support for the Libyan people.
Well, it was so offensive, and Charles, you can, the Clintons at the center of this, and the Blumenthal, who was also in Libya at that time, causing lots of problems, and they had this whole United Nations, this duty to preserve those who are in danger, and they used that, turned it around to get NATO involved in bombing, and a lot of it was about oil, and the whole attempt by Hillary to a CIA. This Arab Spring was the same kind of a stunt that was pulled off in Ukraine, Soros-backed. Social media and militias, the weapons shipping that they were doing illegally. Remember the ship that actually came, that was caught by the Libyan government, and they displayed all the weapons that were supposedly from Qatar, and they actually were. Right. And Mark Turi, who was, remember, they wanted to indict him. And so, we did an awfully lot, I think, before Donald Trump even came into office to expose the evil nature, the criminality of what was going on with this deep state, having, taking upon themselves to disrupt countries. One of the final things you kind of concluded in the Libya situation was that we are Al Qaeda. We created Al Qaeda. We created, and here you wonder, John McCain, all these pictures of John McCain showing up in all the wrong places in Syria with the guys who become ISIS, and his buddy there, Lindsey Graham. I mean, I know we did plenty on that as well.
Yes, we did, absolutely. And right now, Jerry, what's happening is the Libyan National Army is cleaning out the country, and actually they're in Tripoli now, and Turkey is trying to join hands with the illegitimate government that was appointed by the UN in 2015 and snuck into Tripoli. And the world recognizes them supposedly as the legitimate government in Libya, but they're Muslim Brotherhood. They're not anything legitimate. And so they're requesting that the House of Representatives, the legitimate elected government in Tobruk, is asking that the world not recognize that government anymore, that the UN not recognize it, because they're trying to hold hands with Turkey and bring in the Turkish army into Libya.
Well, but Charles, you've done all the work on the Clinton foundations and the Clintons' crimes. I mean, this is just another part of it. The Moriartys were there. They lived in and were involved in the oil industry in Libya before the fall of Gaddafi. And I think your knowledge of how the Clintons operated and theirs, I think, shows two sides of the same picture.
Exactly. And, the Clinton Foundation, we should bring up the fact that and thank you for mentioning that, Jerry, that the Clinton Foundation spread throughout North Africa and the Middle East, even though it had no authority to do any work outside of Little Rock. And actually, one fellow there is now in Egyptian prison. You'll remember his name, and I can't remember his name, but he was the head of the Clinton Foundation in Egypt during the Benghazi, Egyptian, etc., September 11th, 2012 matters. And then he became Mohammed Morsi's right-hand person. And he's in prison in Egypt for a long period of time.
Well,
but there's been no reckoning in the United States. What was the Clinton Foundation doing in Egypt?
Yeah, the Moriartys deserve a lot of credit for their courage because they did the reporting. They connected us to the real patriots in Libya trying to defend their families. And the FBI, I mean, how many government agents contacted you guys overall? Can you remember them all?
We had 5 different agencies, two sections of the FBI. We had the Terrorist Task Force. We had Defense Intelligence Agency.
We had the CIA.
CIA, yeah. And
they were all in our homes.
Yeah. We invited them in. We were so slow on the uptake that we really thought we were going to find a good God-fearing politician. And when he learned all the stuff that we were wrong-footed on in Libya, that something to be done about it. Well, look what happened to us. They took everything we had and then some. So it's been a real rough, tough road to hoe for us.
You mean, it's shocking. You mean the federal government isn't there to help you? That's shocking. I don't know if I'm going to have to try to recover from this.
Yeah, was Mueller head of the FBI when this was happening too?
Mueller was, he was head of the FBI when the Libya destabilization was what, in 2011, 2012?
2011.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
But when they came to your house, when the FBI visited the Moriartys, was it Mueller still? It was.
They came over me in 2000.
So it's coming.
2018, you were visited by the 2 FBI agents with the sheriff.
Yes.
And that was in October.
Yes.
That was just about me. The FBI went to see everybody that I was in contact with. They went to see everybody, and you were just on the list.
Phone, I guess.
I'm sure I've been under electronic surveillance since 2004. That's why I sued Mueller and the federal government. When I co-authored Unfit for Command, that put me on the radar with John O'Neill down in Texas. And shout out to John O'Neill and Merry Christmas to him and his family as well. But they've been watching me. I just assume everything. They knew more about me than I knew about myself. It was a book 8 inches thick, pulling out emails that I don't even remember sending or seeing, and they were this was all their evidence. Said, well, you wrote this, didn't you? I said, I'm sure I did, but I don't particularly remember emails that took me, a few minutes to compose and send off.
I'd like to make a point on that. I also had the pleasure of meeting a few FBI agents.
Thanks to me again.
Thank you, for Jerry. But I'd like to draw a contrast between the mutual experiences that you, the Moriartys, have had, you, Jerry, have had, I've had to a limited extent. Look at the way in which we were put under the microscope. Jerry in a windowless room for hours and hours. And in contrast, Hillary Clinton has an interview at the end of the mishandling of classified information thing. It's up part 2 of 37 on her FBI vault file. You can see a summary of it. She has her lawyers in the room. Her lawyers have struck non-prosecution agreements. They've been allowed to destroy all kinds of evidence, and she's exonerated.
Yeah, they said, would you like a pillow? How about some tea? Would you like a little bit of sugar?
What difference does it make?
Little gin in that tea?
Long time before they picked you up, they picked up JoAnne and myself just after we came off this little dirt road, and they kept us for 31 and a half hours. They would not show us a badge, wouldn't give us a name. They told us they could pick us up anytime they wanted. They could make us disappear, and nobody would know about it. That was years and years ago.
When was that?
That was
probably 2015, I'm thinking.
So that was under Comey.
They went to our house.
So that was under Comey.
Did they go ransack your house?
Yes, it was under Obama.
Oh, yeah. When we got back, our car was in the driveway, but they put us in separate SUVs and drove us for an hour and a half. We didn't know where we were. They never gave us a badge, never gave us a name, kept us in separate rooms.
That's outrageous.
No attorneys. No, nothing.
It is.
Yeah.
I was going to tell you, Jerry, when this FBI agent was here, as he was leaving, Jimmy was talking about some of the things they've done to us here, shooting out lights and doing things. And he said, you realize, don't you, that this interrogation is not about Russia. It has nothing to do with Russia. That's what he said to us.
About when they came and talked to you about me?
Yes.
Yeah.
It didn't have what did it have to do with if it wasn't Russia?
Libya.
He didn't say.
He didn't say. He said, but you do realize this.
He said this whole Russian investigation has nothing to do with Russia.
Yeah, I mean, at one point I asked Goldstein, the most senior of the three that were prosecutors that were interrogating me, I said, look, I haven't been in touch with Assange. Well, I think they thought that somehow I made a contact in Italy. We went to Italy in July and August 2016. It was our 25th wedding anniversary. I think they found some secret squirrel contact that I had. I read about it. This my silent no more. I didn't meet with anyone. That there was no secret. I just figured out that Assange had Podesta's emails, and they couldn't believe it. They just would not. They refused to believe it. They thought I was lying to them and hiding a source. It wasn't true. I wasn't hiding anything.
These incidences that you describe, the Moriartys there and Jerry, and that I know of, I think the FBI has forgotten who works for whom. It's not as if across America that 50% of the country are crooks. I mean, there's a small minority of the population that are crooked and are engaged in criminal behavior. Centered, I would argue, in the Clinton Foundation, the Obama Foundation, elements in both parties. But to treat you that way on your own property, you, Jerry, on your property, and others that way, there has got to be wholesale reform. Christopher Wray has got to go.
Well, see, Charles, you just don't understand what the purpose of the FBI is. The purpose of the FBI is to try to get Martin Luther King to commit suicide by taping his extramarital affairs and sending copies to his wife, getting portfolios on all the politicians in Washington, while meanwhile you go to the track with your boyfriend and lose money betting at the mob's track and don't ever have to pay any of it while you're wearing your dress for dinner with your boyfriend. That's what the FBI is about.
And is that why Bill Clinton's in the dress in Epstein's house?
I wish you hadn't reminded me of that. That's an image. That's one of those indelible images you just wish you had never seen.
The last time when the FBI guy was in our home, I told him, I said, if I'm doing something wrong, then throw me in jail so far you can't shoot beans to me with a 30-30. If I'm not, then stay the hell out of our lives.
Yeah, well, that's where I think we're all saying the same thing. And at Christmas we can, pray that God is still in the hearts of human beings. And these governments that are deep state, I'd say, I'm for moving the federal government out of Washington. I want to put the State Department in the Aleutian Islands. Now, I'd like to get the FBI, I think, in the Mojave Desert. Maybe, though, Death Valley would be better. I'm not sure.
Maybe Sahara Desert.
Where would you put the EPA?
EPA is going to Dalhart, Texas, right next to the feedlots and the Panhandle. They can smell the roses all day long.
Well, Jimmy, JoAnne,
there you go.
Thank you guys so much for joining us on Christmas. I hope you're having a nice time. I hope you don't find your way to Dalhart. I don't know much about it, but I've heard it's not the best
It's in the Panhandle. It's feedlot after feedlot, and they can try to get the cows to behave. They produce a lot of CO2,
Jason, thank you so much. You've been such a help to us. Our DVD sales had dropped off dramatically, and you stepped in with your Patreon and all the Patreon sponsors, everybody around the world that has been so gracious in supporting us. And this is us. This JoAnne and myself and our little tree, this is our entire Christmas venue. So we thank you all much. You're our family, and we really appreciate you. Merry Christmas, all of you, and Happy Hanukkah.
God bless you. You two have done more for freedom in Africa and for Libya. I was happy to play a small part in that, but without your information, I had nothing. And I got to tell you that a lot of people are alive today because of what you did.
Well, thank you, Jerry. And we're still here if you want to do anything with us.
No, I think, unfortunately, we probably will. my wife will probably be, my wife will probably have some things to say about, can't you retire? She will say. I'll get that lecture. Say, yes, I promise to retire.
Eventually,
when I get older. I'm not old enough yet.
Yeah. Exactly.
The only retire we know about has to do with our car tires.
Exactly. Retirement. That's very good. Jimmy is always hilarious. Jimmy, JoAnne, thank you so much for joining us, guys. And for people who are watching A Very Corsi Christmas, if they haven't seen the Moriartys before, every Monday night Unseen Libya with Jimmy and JoAnne Moriarty on patreon.com/James and JoAnne Moriarty. Have a really Merry Christmas, guys. I'll see you on Monday.
God bless you.
God
Enjoy
bless.
the cookies,
Merry
Jason.
Christmas.
Oh, the cookies. I'm getting fat, I have to tell you. Thank you so much, JoAnne. They're delicious. Have a great Christmas,
You're
guys.
welcome.
Well, there we go.
God bless.
Moriarty's excellent.
Yeah, that was great.
Excellent. Well, we do have a few more people who are going to be calling to join us, but it's been such a consequential year, 2019, and it's just queuing up what's going to be probably an even more, I mean, this is historic stuff, right, Dr. Corsi?
I think it's more than historic. It's never happened in the history of the United States. I mean, this is truly a coup d'etat. My next book, which will be out this first quarter, is called Coup d'etat.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an international one. I mean, it involved, I think, British intelligence, Australian intelligence, Italian intelligence. This was an international attempt by the one advantage of Donald Trump is I think he forced out in the open the Democratic Party as a socialist party. The party of John Kennedy and Hubert Humphrey is gone, R.I.P., it's done. And now it's the Democrat Socialist Party. And we also forced the deep state into this Trump derangement syndrome to come out in the open with clearly a fabricated first Russian collusion, and it collapsed after more than 2 years. And when the Ukraine Gate version of Russia Gate, it only took about 3 weeks to collapse because the people have already seen that show.
Yeah, I think it also exposed, I know you probably go down this track yourself, it's also exposed the mainstream press to be, let's charitably say, gullible, or, the truth is it's just a propaganda wing for the deep state and the criminal conspiracy that has been harvesting hundreds of billions of dollars through unregulated globalism from 1989 forward.
Well, the control of the media is fundamental to the ability to have a totalitarian state. I mean, the two things that are developing, if you read Edwin Snowden's new book, Permanent Record, the ability of the federal government, all this technology which we're using today, also can be a permanent record, which the NSA can record of all electronic communication in the United States and the world. Now with face recognition technology, which is remarkably good, built into the new generation of phones that we have, the cellular phones, you're going to be able to have a person's entire life recorded to be played back at any moment they decide they want to. Mm-hmm. Go back and search some particular time or record. The apparatus of the intelligence agencies technologically, and beginning with Operation Mockingbird, the determination of the intelligence agencies to control the media in order to shape the public debate. William Casey, when he was head of the CIA, said we would know the CIA's misinformation program had succeeded when everything Americans believed was false. Mm-hmm. On the public news stories.
Coming close.
Coming very close. And this was the remarkable thing about this was, the Russia Gate, I don't think there was ever a predicate except that Hillary and the operatives, Brennan and the operatives in the Democratic Party, decided when they found out that the emails had been stolen in 2016, decided that they were going to blame it on Russia. And it's been remarkable to me. The Democrats, going back to 1917, have always been in love with Russia. But at the moment the Berlin Wall came down in 1991, when Russia renounced communism, suddenly the left hates Russia. And the Soros globalists, and Soros has been a major factor in funding this leftist try to take over, progressive takeover of the world, the globalism, that they are determined to suppress human freedom and to recreate a Cold War where we antagonize Russia. I think Ukraine makes that very clear with the attempt to move all these Eastern European countries into NATO and actually hold a Soros U.S. aid coup in Ukraine in 2014 with the Maidan uprising to put Poroshenko, a Nazi, into power out and get Yanukovych, a Russian, to flee in order to push Ukraine into the EU and NATO, which is what the State Department officials under Obama wanted to do. That was very clear from their testimony to Schiff's House Intelligence Committee. They had ideological differences with Donald Trump, and they wanted to get rid of Donald Trump because the State Department wanted to be in charge of foreign policy.
Exactly. And one of the things that's, when I look at this mayhem that we've experienced 2015 forward, and people are saying, oh, let's focus on July 10th, 2015, when the FBI opened its investigation into mishandling of Hillary Clinton's classified information. No, let's focus on the period leading up to January 21st, when Hillary Clinton was made Secretary of State on the basis of completely false background testing of her and the Clinton Foundation, and who made the decision to allow Hillary Clinton to have this crazy toilet bowl server system and unvetted devices, and to keep all that email the property of we the people after she left on February 1st, 2013, until she turned some of the emails in December of 2014. Who authorized that?
Well, the surprise is they say that it was Guccifer, the original Guccifer, whose name I forget at the moment, but the one who's in prison in the United States,
the
from
taxi driver, right?
Yeah,
Romanian.
Lazar something or other.
Yeah, Marcus Lazar.
Yeah, and that he was hacking into Blumenthal's emails, and he discovered the Clinton email server. That's just ridiculous. First of all, Hillary's having a private email server in the State Department was well known. Even Obama was using an alias to communicate over the Clinton.com server. And you can't have this kind of a server operational from someone in the State Department without all the intelligence agencies in the world knowing it.
Right.
And the FBI knowing it. And, they all wink, wink, and allow it. It allowed the Clintons to have a back channel. And Charles, you know this better than anyone, where they could negotiate pay to play with every oligarch in the world to get favors through the State Department, including the Uranium One, which I think is still probably the biggest unappreciated scandal in the entire Clinton realm.
I'm glad you mentioned that. There's a new book out, or a book out recently by Jim Rickards called Aftermath. And one of our viewers sent me an email suggesting that I take a look at page 39 of that book. Talks all about Uranium One, and it's about six pages, goes into the detail that purview of that scandal was not given to the committee that he was on. It was shunted into the side. So Peter Schweizer's not yet told the whole tale. He's looked at some of the record. I really commend that book to our viewership and to you.
I'll take a look at it. I mean, the whole thing was very slick. I mean, Frank Giustra, this guy who started out in Canada as a penny stock dealer, and decided he was going to go into mining, and he gets together with Clinton. He flies with Clinton around on a few airplane trips. They go over to Kazakhstan and get the rights on uranium. Well, Kazakhstan is the largest producer of uranium in the world. Produce about 63% of all the uranium produced. And of course, Russia had always coveted the Kazakhstan rights. So Clinton goes in with this Frank Giustra, and they steal the rights from under them. Well, Russia wants to get them back. And the Clintons say, well, you can't. Just let us build this little company up with a few investors, and then you can buy it, Russia. It was a setup from the beginning.
Yeah, I know. It's just amazing to me. And I think that there are good people in government. Don't get me wrong. There must be some good people. But in the last...
They're all dead now.
But in the last 30 years, you look at this Clinton template. It's not about just Uranium One. It's not about Ukraine. It's a template where you get crooked donors. There's always a crooked donor looking for some gift out of a high federal official, high national official. You get that crooked donor to route money to the politician or to the family, either directly or through a foundation. And then we, the people, bear the burden of the theft of resources that happens, of the debt that gets piled on us. And they just go around the world collecting honorarium and speeches and medals and other high office. They get statues put up to them. I mean, George Soros, if there's one place we should be able to agree across the political spectrum, forgetting the hard left progressives, of the decent Kennedy Democrats and the mainstream Republicans and fair-minded independents in this country, is that George Soros needs to be rounded up forthwith, Corsiized, pasteurized, given a fair trial, and then all his money stripped and spend the rest of his life in prison. As a precedent, we've got to set a precedent that this cannot keep going.
Well, one of the books I wrote. Go ahead, Jason.
Well, I was just going to say, if I understand correctly, Charles, it would seem that Hunter Biden has combined some of these things because he's both a high official and crooked. So it's like all in one there.
Yeah, it's a switch hitter. Look, the guy that I wrote, I think one of my best books was that I liked the best, America for Sale, which I think is not yet even fully appreciated, because what I was writing about in that book was the opportunity to look at the United States and to look at the world through the eyes of a sociopathic criminal, which is that if you can capture power, and you can, Soros or the Clintons, you get to ingratiate yourself to this globalist elite that want to combine to steal all the assets of the world. You can begin selling off America. Now, you can do it through a trade agreement in which the jobs go to China. Mm-hmm. That's selling off America. You can do it through the Uranium One, in which the uranium goes to Russia. You can do it through any number of these international deals, which are always concocted to benefit some of the global elite, who then have the money to buy the Media Matters and all the other groups that can demonize those of us who are trying to fight for the truth, who are trying to expose this to the American people. Meanwhile, our resources get limited. They make sure you can't get any jobs, you can't get any consulting, you can't get on television. They go and attack the advertisers because they've cornered the money. And as such, they've cornered a lot of the global power, and the intelligence agencies, the law enforcement agencies, all begin working on their agenda, some of them motivated by money, others ideologically. But the ideology here is fundamental. You can go back and read it in the early 50s, when the communists, who realized that it was not going to be a workers of the world revolt kind of takeover like Marx had predicted, but it was going to be done more like Gramsci through the incrementalism of chipping away at God, chipping away at family, chipping away at all the traditional beliefs, and getting people so where they were going to accept as normal behavior that traditionally would be seen as very abnormal, and in the process take over governments, take over, dumb down the American people and any people who attempted to have a true liberal education where they were going to be participating as citizens. The global elites have always hated the idea, going back millennial, 2,000-3,000 years, going back in history, have always wanted to be the elite who could control the assets of the world, and everybody else lives like slaves till there's another war where great numbers of them are killed off and the bankers make the money.
One of the things that's so shocking to me as somebody who was going through high school, I graduated in 70 and I graduated high school in 74, college 78, is in that period, I remember well, it was the liberals and the progressives who were saying, you have to be tolerant of our new ideas and diversity and all that kind of stuff. And now the intolerance, watching Adam Schiff in that court, that kangaroo court, and Nadler banging the gavel down, denying due process in the way that they did. Now Nancy Pelosi, no speedy trial. You look at that, and I think really the shift towards Trump that is evident so far in the real polls that are coming out is only going to accelerate, because good people across this country look at this and say, I don't want this team in charge of anything.
The best thing that happened to me in this whole period of time, beginning in 2016, but certainly in 2019, was that the evil had to go on display.
Right.
That the Trump derangement syndrome brought the communists and socialists to control the Democratic Party, and we see it. They controlled Congress. They've controlled the intelligence agencies, the FBI. People now see the abuses of Mueller. And if you want to live in a world, it's sure they want to get rid of Donald Trump, because what party would want to run on, we're going to kill babies after they're born if the mother doesn't want them, put them safe for a while, keep them comfortable, and kill them. We're going to tax all your money and give it to somebody else. Give me your wallet. I can spend your money better than you can.
You didn't build that.
You didn't build that. By the way, this whole idea of believing in God, well, you can't, you can go in the closet and read the Bible if you want to, but don't talk about God in the public square, because if you do, we're going to rip out all the symbols of God. We don't want God around. And then nothing wrong with transvestites exposing themselves, reading nursery rhymes to kids in story hour.
Yeah, it's really shocking. But let's hope, though. I mean, we have
those of us who object, we get to go to prison because we're intolerant of their
hate speech.
We're xenophobes, we're racists, we're homophobes. They've got a word for everything, when in fact the intolerance is on the side of those who want to impose this new agenda, which to those of us who believe in God and Jesus Christ looks satanic in its nature.
Right. You take that guy Swalwell, and I'll keep it clean because it's Christmas, but I mean, we could call him something else if we wanted to. It's a little smelly. But that guy saying now, the nerve of what he's saying publicly on all these networks, he's saying, if Donald Trump has nothing to hide, he shouldn't mind. He's obviously guilty if he won't provide the information that we are demanding. He's obviously guilty.
The whole Russiagate started out with a lie. I mean, that Russia stole the emails, which I think Seth Rich, all the evidence, what Julian Assange says. Now Julian Assange is locked up in a prison in England, so he can't talk. And the whole idea, they were determined that Donald Trump had to be guilty of something. Now, the Russiagate was opened, so the FBI with Operation Crossfire Hurricane, which they opened up as a counterintelligence operation, which means they didn't have to have probable cause. They didn't have to follow standard rules of evidence. And under these relaxed standards, they were looking for evidence of anything they could find. When that failed, that got opened, Operation Crossfire Hurricane, on July 31st, 2016. That we're finding nothing. So even with undercover agents, people wearing wires, trying to, get Papadopoulos or Carter Page into compromising situation, feeding them with information that they then wanted to use to implicate someone in dealing with Russia. That was the Carter Page deal and Papadopoulos. And then they said, well, we've got to go to another level. We're going to go to the FISA court, and we're going to use the Steele dossier. We're going to lie about it. Because if we can just get electronic surveillance on Carter Page, then everybody he talks to, we can have counter surveillance over the whole team of Donald Trump, and we'll find something they're doing wrong. It's a search for evidence.
But Dr. Corsi, doesn't it seem like Carter Page was an operational plant that they put in there knowing they were going to surveil him, like the CIA?
I'm convinced. I mean, I've gotten to know Carter Page and talked to him, and I interviewed him.
But even if he didn't know that.
No, let me explain what I'm thinking. Is that, Carter Page is not a guy who is devious in any way, and he wanted to be in this international energy sector. And when he got contacts with Russians or others who he felt were somehow enemies of the United States, he came to the FBI and the CIA and he told them he was being a loyal, good citizen trying to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. When they realized he was going to be in the campaign, the idea was to entrap him, to start planning, send him to a conference in Moscow, bring him back to London, say he met these people, and that's what Christopher Steele did. I think Carter Page himself was unaware that he was the target and unaware that he was being used for the electronic surveillance, because Carter Page felt like he had been telling the FBI and CIA, I didn't have anything to do with these guys. I was giving an academic paper. And he, I'm sure, was reporting even through this period of time. But in a devious mentality, they knew, the FBI and the intelligence agencies knew they could set him up and use him as a pretext. They had to get somebody to be the pretext to do the electronic surveillance. I think Carter Page was not the opening of the Crossfire Hurricane, was more opened on the setup with Papadopoulos.
Well, he's another person that again, I'm not saying that Carter Page was complicit, but
no, I don't think he was.
I don't either, but I think Lee Harvey Oswald thought he was working for the CIA and the FBI until he witnessed Kennedy getting shot and realized, wait a minute, something's going on here.
A lot of what Charles was saying earlier, I was thinking that this, traces back to, I was senior in high school when Kennedy was shot, and I'd seen Kennedy in the hearings. My father had been a labor negotiator with the unions and had done a lot of work in lobbying for the unions in Washington. I was largely a truant from school. I didn't like attending, and so it was much more fun to sit and watch the McClellan Committee hearings or to follow the hearings. And I was watching Keefe Arbor crime hearings on TV instead of going to elementary school, and much more entertaining. And so you see that the beginning of this deep state. Yes, I think Lee Harvey Oswald. The idea that John Kennedy was shot with a Mannlicher Carcano rifle and with a misaligned scope and a clip that didn't work properly, and he was going to, while he had a shot, the car was coming down Houston Street to turn on Elm. He had a full body shot, but he said, no, I'll wait until the car is going downhill at a 3-degree angle and accelerate and go through the underpass when I've got to shoot through a tree in order to have just a headshot of the back of the head, because I want to score points on this like a video game. Well, you don't do that. I mean, it's not. The whole setup of the Kennedy assassination smacks of an intelligence operation and a crossfire. Once that turn is made onto Elm Street, you've got to go through the triple underpass.
Crossfire, they've always said.
They
It
like
was the
that crossfire.
triangulation of fire.
Well,
and
that's
so the crossfire hurricane is similar in that, again,
setups.
I believe these intelligence agencies.
I credit that to Jim Mars, by the way, who's now passed away, and who was a good friend, and I miss him. But he was, I think, brilliant on understanding, almost from the very beginning, as I did too. I mean, the day I was watching it, I was telling my father had been in Washington that day. He flew home early because of the assassination. It was Friday. He was going to come home, but he made it at home, watched the evening play out. And I've never liked Lyndon Johnson. I can remember my dad, Lyndon Johnson got out, he gave his speech on the tarmac. He said, I'm asking for your help and for God's. Okay, now I was a senior in high school. I said, Dad, is this guy, you don't say that. That's rhetorical. So I'm asking for your help and for the help of God. Now you've got rhetorically a good, so your help and God's. I said, is this guy any good? Oh, he loves unions. He's okay. I said, yeah, Dad, I don't know. Lyndon Johnson's not my kind of guy. And Jack Kennedy, I think at the end of his life, after the Cuban Missile Crisis, began to realize that the intelligence agencies were working as their own government. And when he fired Allen Dulles from the head of the CIA, of course, Allen Dulles had spent World War II in Bern, Switzerland, helping Bormann and Hitler get Nazi money into the U.S. stock market. And so, you have Allen Dulles running the CIA. When I wrote Killing the Deep State, I said that Allen Dulles was one of the chief plotters in the entire plot. At any rate, today, 1963, when you saw, as I saw through my eyes, the Kennedy assassination, it was an intelligence operation together with the organized crime, the FBI on it, and you couldn't convince that. It was very hard. The mainstream media was, of course, Operation Mockingbird, bought and paid for by the CIA, and you couldn't get these messages across. We were the conspiracy theorists. We were marginalized, and always, even including today, the Mueller investigation. You lose your employment, you lose all your consulting. You can't get on TV because the left comes in and attacks the advertisers if you show up on Fox or anywhere else. The deep state is now exposed. And I think the average American looking at it is going to say, Martha, this just doesn't make sense. This guy, Schiff, makes, the old Jack Parr looks, there's a Jabba the Hutt here. With these guys, they're not given fair, there's no fairness here. There's no due process. This is just not right. Well, for the average person seeing that and saying this is just not right, that's an important moment in history.
Well, I'd like to, if I can, bring you forward back into 2016, because I know, and I don't know that the viewers know just how much you were involved in this, but you were aware, I believe, of early on of efforts to the people had found the Aberdeen Wiener laptop, and I forget when that actually came together. Was it late August 2016? It was
late August, and the history of that is I was actually one day working in New York City just trying to figure out an article to do to WorldNet Daily at that time, and it was right after Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch, who I give a shout out to, Merry Christmas, they were doing a great job. They had published about 250 emails from Huma Abedin, who is Hillary Clinton's main assistant. She, of course, Huma Abedin had a history in the Muslim Brotherhood, and Hillary was very close to her. She was married to Weiner. And
married.
Yeah, married. Weiner's busy exposing himself to underage girls through the internet. I mean, it's a nice, normal activity. At any rate, so what I did was I said, well, I've had a lot of training. I did a lot of, I work through universities with intelligence agents. Most intelligence work is very boring, okay? And so what I decided to do was take Huma Abedin's emails and make trees of the emails she was from, to, who was connecting to who, what email addresses were they using. And I found that Huma Abedin was using this one email address that was redacted. It was blocked out. And I said, I wonder what that one is. Well, searching through all these 250 emails, there was one instance where they had left it unredacted, and it was to her Yahoo account. And I realized she was sending Hillary Clinton's classified emails to her Yahoo account. And when she was doing that, anybody in the world who had her username and password, whom she allowed to have or she sold to have, could be reading those classified emails real time in the State Department.
Any Yahoo.
But let's focus on the timeline. So any Yahoo, right? So that's August, right before Labor Day, right?
Yes.
And then at some point, was it the New York City Police Department became aware of it?
Okay, what happened was that and again, this was Peter Smith involved. Smith, I told Peter Smith what I'd found and published, and he called me. I never met Peter Smith. I never in person met him.
Nor had I.
And he got interested in it. Now, he tried to get Yahoo to let him into the account, or to try to get some reason. He hired attorneys. He eventually got to the New York City Police, and they were tipped off on this. I told Peter, I said, if she's using a Yahoo account, then she's using some computer that's offline to Hillary. That was I didn't know that, but that was just an intuitive guess. And so, well, Peter kind of connected and said, well, let's go find out what's on Weiner's computers. So at that point, Comey had shut down the Hillary Clinton investigation. The FBI was told they couldn't investigate Hillary Clinton anymore. But the New York police were told that they were going to go in and look for sexting information on his computer. They said, well, how do we know that Weiner's still sexting? He'd been in prison for that, I believe, already and they said, well, if he's sexting before, he'll be sexting now. So they went and seized, and they invited the FBI. The FBI went in with them on the raid. And the FBI said, well, we're not investigating Hillary, we're investigating sexting, international or nationally across state lines. They got the laptop, they looked at the laptop, and they found thousands of these emails that were being transferred to the Yahoo account. And Comey reopens the investigation because New York was going to publish them.
But let me stop you on that, because what happened is we have in the FBI vault file we've done on the show, October 3rd, 2016. So that's 5 weeks before the election.
Right.
Internal memo says, we don't yet know who the person is. I think it's a woman who wrote it. Just putting this out there is the way they start the memo, which is not the way most men write, I don't think. But just putting this out there, we have a laptop. It has 340,000 emails on it. It's October 3rd, but I'm not going to look at any of them. And it goes through the fact that they're emails, they were not from Hillary, from Uma to Hillary and back and forth. Many, many emails. This is in the memo, October 3rd, 2016. Now contrast that with the FISA on Carter Page. You have this, it's sitting in the FBI office in New York, I think. They seized it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes.
Before October 3rd, they had it. We don't yet know the right date. You have this, you're not going to look at that, but you're going to swear out how many false FISA warrants were sworn out?
Four.
Well, no, they were denied, right?
Well, I don't know how many were denied. See, that's the Horowitz report is, I think, inaccurate on that. I think they were trying. I think they actually may have even gotten more than they claim they're getting, but they were trying to get additional people under FISA surveillance. But to follow this up, you remember Comey opened the investigation, and then he closed it a couple days later.
A week later.
Well, I called up the public information officer of the New York Police Department. Says, Dr. Corsi, what happened? I said, Dr. Corsi, the FBI came in here, the team, and they not only took the Wiener laptop, they took all the copies we had, they took all the information out of our computers, they made it all erased, they had everything, and they told us if we did anything to investigate or follow up on that case, we'd be prosecuted.
Well, and also Comey said, you remember, it was October 31st, actually, that they got the search warrant, and Comey had to come forward and say, we reopened the case. Liberals and Democrats were berserk.
They went insane.
More insane.
More insane. Yeah, it's true, more insane.
And then Comey said, after less than a week, our vaunted forensic experts have gone through this whole thing, says that to the public, and then we get later in this 37-part file, we find evidence that actually that was not true. They only searched like 4,000 out of 340,000, and they didn't even search it the way I would have instructed. I'm no expert on this stuff, but I said, look, I don't care how many people we need to bring in here. I want every single email read. Every single, not this, we'll search it based on search terms or search it on every email.
And the real important thing there, I think, would have been just to do what I did. In other words, these emails were probably between Hillary and Huma, and then she directs them to her Yahoo account,
right?
And does that by, I think, putting her State Department email address on the laptop, and then using the laptop to forward them to her Yahoo account.
Right.
Doing that offline. That was the whole point. Is that I'm not sure Hillary. They said, well, why would she? Why would They said, well, she's used this private computer, and Huma was on it so that they could print out more easily than they could at the State Department. That was one of their explanations. But I'm not sure that Hillary knew that Huma was sending these to her Yahoo account. And I've always suspected that could be an espionage case.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the thing here, when you have, I'm no expert on espionage, but when you have a team that is this absurdly sloppy, right, and you have all these sharks around the world, what's going on in Libya, it's of academic interest to us, maybe some personal interest. But if you're, implicated one way or the other in Libya, you really care a lot that you have now found a Secretary of State who is this sloppy.
Yeah.
And you could buy a life in Libya for $1,000. I mean, think what you could do for $1 million. So this was a massive security risk from the very beginning.
The whole purpose of Hillary wanted to be able to, as we said earlier, to communicate with these people offline and use State Department favors so it could never be tied back. I remember it's so important to look at the politics from a criminal's point of view. 1981, 1982, I wrote a paper. I figured out a computer model that predicted the outcome of terrorist events. And I published it in a journal at Yale, your alma mater. And it was a game theoretic journal. And the paper was called Terrorism is a Desperate Game. And I gave a paper at the National Science Foundation, Academy of Science in Washington, D.C. Oh. And the next thing I knew, I was being contacted by a psychiatrist in Denver, wanted to go to lunch with me. And I said, figured out they recruited me to participate with a group of psychiatrists who were trying to work with the State Department on how to deal with terrorism. I spent several years being trained by psychiatrists, around the world, some of the best in the world, and we did quite a lot of work to figure out, how to deal with the terrorist mentality at that time and what it was about. And you had to be able to think it through. I remember when I was a kid, one of the fundamental things I decided, one day my father said to me, he said, son, you've got a criminal mentality. And said, well, Dad, where do you think I got it? But what I decided to do early on in my life was I decided that I was not going to be a criminal. It's a big fundamental. I believed in God. I was going to be moral. And that was a fundamental decision I made early in life.
Not one that the Clintons made.
No, not one that the Clintons made. And I saw that there was no ultimate advantage to being a criminal. But I had gotten to know and spent time with the organized criminals. I read about this in Killing the Deep State, who were in Arizona, who were responsible for John Kennedy being president, because were responsible for the information about the Teamsters moving into the mob, moving into the Teamsters Union, that was fundamental to the McClellan Committee hearings being opened. I got to know the family that was like first star witness in those hearings, that had done the initial wiretap. I spent a lot of time with them. And they were, one in particular was very, very brilliant, very major impact on my life. And it was interesting to see that even though they were criminals, there was still a moral code among that group. That they felt like people needed. They opened up Vegas and Reno for gambling, and that they felt that people need to gamble. People like to gamble. But they did not get involved in the drug trade. They didn't get involved in prostitution. I mean, there was a code of, and it was those criminals who were mostly Protestant against the Irish and Catholics and the Jews who had been the Eastern mobs. And there was a lot of the story of the Kennedy family is not that Bobby Kennedy went after the mobs, but he went after the Eastern mob on behalf of the Western mob, because the Western mob had helped Jack, and the Eastern mob had never accepted Joe Kennedy as an Irishman. And that's a whole long story. I write about it extensively. But it began to open up my eyes, even as a very young man, to the whole underbelly, the story of politics that isn't told, what we now today call the deep state, and how its criminal nature, how fundamental to criminology, understanding criminals, is that a sociopath, and many of these are sociopaths or psychopaths, look at all rules as arbitrary.
Right.
You just made up those rules. Very much the way the Democratic Party and the left looks at the Constitution. Well, that was just a group of white people who made these set of rules so they can keep their slaves and their property and slave everybody else. That's a sociopath's way of looking at the Constitution.
That's right before they swear an oath to defend the Constitution, or right after?
In Kobe's case, probably both.
Now, we've got another caller that I want to bring on.
Sure.
This is a regular guest on Crowdsource the Truth, who I don't know if either of you guys have ever interacted with this guest before. It's David Hawkins. David, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, Jason. Can I put my camera on?
Please, if you could. Okay, David, so we're here with Charles Ortel and Dr. Corsi, and we're recording a very Corsi Christmas. I wanted you to share some of the information that we've been talking about with regard to Yulia and Sergei Skripal and how they were poisoned.
And Merry Christmas.
And Merry Christmas, yes.
Merry Christmas, Dr. Corsi and Charles, right?
And Charles, yes.
Okay, Sergei Skripal was a British double agent who apparently shopped about 300 Russian agent names to the British, which they would have shared with the Americans. So he was in jail in Russia and visited presumably from time to time by his daughter Yulia, if that's the right pronunciation.
Yep.
Anyway, there was a big spy exchange where 10 illegals in the United States, including Anna Chapman, the glamour girl, she was exchanged for, amongst others, Sergei Skripal, who came to live in England.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then Sergei Skripal was being visited by his daughter from Moscow, or wherever she came from, and they were found slumped on a park bench, and they had been poisoned by a nerve agent by the name of Novichok.
Yep.
Now,
I remember this. I do remember this.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, we're just recalling that we remember the incident.
Okay, so the British government immediately blamed the Russians. The Russians said, we never called that particular nerve agent Novichok. That was a name given it by the West. So as you know, perhaps you know, gentlemen, I immediately go off to the patent office to see if I can find any reference to the word Novichok in the patent office, and lo and behold, I find a detoxification system developed at Northwestern University, which is home for the psychopathic Bernardine Dawn, or was, on faculty, and apparently under a detoxification contract with the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, Northwestern University got the funds to develop a detoxification against various elements that have been collected from nerve warfare people around the world, including Novichok. So there would have been a stock of Novichok in Northwestern University, but the Russians said we didn't have any of this kind of stuff. All right? So I believe that the Novichok was actually shipped from Chicago via Boscombe Down, which is the airport on the outskirts of Salisbury, run for the Ministry of Defense, a black ops airport probably. And a few weeks after the poisoning, they recovered. Sergei Skripal and Julia Skripal recovered, albeit very distressing. Julia had, I think, a tracheotomy, if that's the right word.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see the scar on the bottom of her throat when she gives a carefully staged interview that was scripted by British intelligence, I believe. And then I think Jason was going to find out from a Russian speaker if he could trace the English language going through the Russian, because the phrases were very odd. But fast forward, a few weeks later, a man called, what was his name? Charlie Rowley, who was the partner of a woman called Dawn Sturgis, found, and he can't remember quite where he found, a box in a gift box containing a Nina Ricci perfume bottle. And it was in a cellophane wrap, and it looked all intact, etc. He gave it to his partner, Dawn Sturgis, who happens to be the mother of 2 children by her former partner by the name of Andrew Hope, who works for Kinetic at Boscombe Down. And Andrew Hope is a senior systems engineer, and lo and behold, a few days ago I discovered that he was probably the senior systems engineer on the development of the wind tunnel facility used by Kinetic to test the flyability of the Supermax 8 aircraft for Boeing. So as I discussed in the last show with Jason, what seems to me is a great opportunity for a man-in-the-middle attack on Boeing, because they really want to destroy Boeing, right, where you can actually feed fake data to the maneuverability computer-assisted system that was used by Boeing to stabilize the flight of that plane, which had changed its profile fairly dramatically. And in its wisdom, and I think it was a big mistake, Boeing went to Kinetic because they have a 5-meter wind tunnel facility at Farnborough Airport in the United Kingdom. And I believe Kinetic, which is a major player in the social engineering protection appliance, actually has monitored a number of people who might blow the whistle on this scam.
Now, David, if I can interrupt, I think you've successfully overwhelmed both Charles and Dr. Corsi.
I followed it. I mean,
it's quite an integrated plan, and it was interesting, Dr. Corsi, because when you mentioned the other day on our show that Lawrence Tribe was the ideological father of lawfare, it clicked something in my mind that helped me realize that all of the things that are happening, I mean, to just say that the impeachment was planned as soon as Trump was elected, sure, that's obvious. But the degree to which it was planned, the integration of the lawfare blog, Ben Whitty's, this counter narrative about the death of Peter Smith, this counter narrative about the poisoning of Yulia and Sergei Skripal, who, by the way, David, I don't know if you mentioned that, isn't it known that Christopher Steele was the handler for Sergei Skripal?
Oh, that's very interesting. The agent for Skripal, who handled him in the field, was a man called Bruno Miller, or Pablo Miller. Pablo Miller.
Yeah.
The boss of Pablo Miller was Christopher Steele at MI6.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I knew that. I knew that came out in a lot of the research. I realized. In fact, it's been used about Christopher Steele to say he wasn't all that great if one of the people that they were supposedly handling ends up poisoned. And
right.
But on that subject, if I could just jump in, it's Charles here. You bring up Anna Chapman and the unequal exchange of Americans for Russians. That occurred she was rounded up on June 27th, 2010. And that exchange occurred, I think, by July 7th, 2010. Now, if we go back into that period, that's a period where Barack Obama and the incoming Obama administration is under siege. That's a period when the Tea Party is surging up. That's a period when people are really concerned about that midterm election, 2010 election. And as it happened, 2 days before Anna Chapman, I believe 2 days before Anna Chapman was rounded up, might have been 3, I attended a party in a house for that famous economist, Nouriel Roubini, and there were, as it could be at his parties, there were like 50 women and 10 men. And I was there with a date. And the person who was hosting this party was Anna Chapman. And I was struck by, first of all, she was very beautiful. But she turned to me and she said, "Don't I know you from the Hamptons?" And being the idiot that I am, I gave her a 30-minute lecture about why I hate the Hamptons and no, you didn't even know. but then I read subsequently that was code that the Russians use to ask whether you are a Russian agent. And that she would ask me, and I told the FBI agents who came to me last year after Jerry was so kind enough to have them in. I told them this story, and I said, "Listen, this is what happened, and I got to ask you guys a question. Why did you rush Anna Chapman and her people out in an unequal exchange for these men? Why did you do that?" And the guys are like, "I can't talk about it."
Right.
But there are a lot of tentacles of this thing that we need to go back in and understand what is the business of the FBI under Robert Mueller from September 4th, 2001 forward. What was he trying to accomplish?
Destroy the country.
Who put him in there? How did he stay in power that long? How many things did that bozo screw up?
Yeah.
Most of that traces back also to Mark Turi. They were all involved with the Mark Turi cover-up.
Right.
But what's interesting in this, wasn't the design flaw of the 737 that they moved the engines further forward?
Yes, and it made the jet out of balance. And they developed an artificial system, an artificial intelligence system to adjust the attitude of the
plane. It. Well, it makes it unstable. I mean, first of all, that's not where you want the engines forward fundamentally change the dynamics of how the plane flies.
Just jump in
and why? Can you explain what was that all about?
Yeah, because because there was more instability introduced with that design.
Right.
They turned to kinetic, which has a patent for a social engineering protection appliance.
Right.
Where it conveniently places what is deemed to be objectionable by kinetics handlers in a sort of safe vault so that the public at large doesn't get to see it. So anything that Jason and I do, in my opinion, is placed in a vault by kinetic so that it reduces our level of contact. But the important thing about kinetic is, as I say, Andrew Hope would be the senior systems engineer on the wind tunnel facility at Farnborough, with which they would have tested the stability of the Boeing Supermax aircraft. And had they introduced an instability like a man-in-the-middle attack, they could actually use telemetry signals to the aircraft and actually induce an instability from which the pilots couldn't recover. So I believe both of those planes were hijacked electronically through telemetry signals.
But just to clarify, the reason for the larger engines, Dr. Corsi, was because Airbus had introduced an A320 with what they called the NEO, the new engine option. It was a much more fuel-efficient engine that is, in part, more efficient because it's larger and it has a higher bypass ratio. So it just is a physically much larger.
But why do you have to put it forward?
So what Boeing did was they tried to add a more efficient engine, and the only way to do it without it dragging on the ground was to raise them up and move them forward slightly, which made the plane out of balance. And to compensate for the out of balance plane, they have this maneuverability characteristics automation system that when it gets into a stall situation, it points the nose down. The theory that David and I are working on is that the actual facility where the wind tunnel testing was done during the development of the plane is obviously putting out a ton of data that's being utilized by Boeing engineers in the design process. And David has identified that the key avionics engineer at Kinetic mysteriously had the mother of his children die from this Novichok poisoning right after the time that he was there. What we're speculating is if this guy knew that something was deliberately done, or if there was a hack of that wind tunnel where bad information was passed to Boeing that resulted in a design flaw being baked into the 737 MAX 8, or some sort of flaw that, as David says, could be activated at any time an attacker wanted to cause that MCAS system to be fooled into crashing the plane, it could be a hidden way of hacking and attacking Boeing.
And if I may say so, warning a potential whistleblower,
Right.
because I think Andrew Hope wanted to blow the whistle on that, so they killed his former partner and the mother of his children.
Wow.
And it's apparently a really horrible way to die, which is consistent with the psychopathic Bernadine Dawn, because she loves to see people suffer.
Yeah. It's also consistent, David, with basically hitting somebody, doing a murder, and there's no murder investigation. It's just considered some strange accidental death.
Well, I mean, there's many of these instances. You know, the Howard Hunt's wife dying in a plane crash with a lot of money. A lot of these incidents. It's why. What was the motive to damage Boeing? What would be gained by damaging Boeing?
The business goes to Airbus, and the British are still maybe perhaps a bit cheesed off, as Charles would say, that their once great glory as the leaders in the aviation industry at the end of World War II.
Can I just jump in there?
Yeah.
I believe British intelligence is more powerful than it's ever been, because it's launched a series of attacks, including 9/11, right? And then it's got the BBC World Service, which is the world's premier broadcaster. And I coined a phrase, basically it's from Newspeak and George Orwell in 1984, of unwitnessed. So what they'll do is they'll tell you, you might have seen something, right? But it doesn't agree with what the party wants you to see. So you are now unwitnessed, which means you'll never get into court. For example, logically on 9/11, we should have had firefighters in the court and pilots. Not a one of them. You know, in the Hellerstein court in Southern District of New York, the expert witnesses, the real expert witnesses, not the fake ones, never got a chance to tell the public what really happened. Over to you.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you for giving us that overview.
One more thing before we go,
sure.
David. All these incidents, you watch these incidents with the on the bridges near Parliament with people crashing into crowds or stabbings.
Warnall or Norwal husks or whatever.
Right. These incidents are all happening on this particular bridge, and of course, it's a very, that bridge has got such a scenic background to it. It's so important historically. But what happens to the witnesses in these kinds of events? Do they know exactly what was going on, but the events subsequently get to be really immediately quashed, and not much you hear about them one way or the other.
Well, there's a variety of ways of unwitnessing a witness. One is killing them, obviously. The other is frightening the hell out of them. So if Andrew Hope was aware that there was a sabotage and a man-in-the-middle attack on the wind tunnel data that would have fed instability into the Boeing Supermax 8 aircraft, then he needed to be shut up. Well, one way of shutting him up is to kill his partner and the mother of his children, right, in a really horrible way. Right? And I believe that kinetic actually shipped the Novichok in from Chicago and probably shipped the anthrax out from Porton Down into the States after 9/11, because the signature of that, and Robert Mueller, because one of you mentioned Robert Mueller earlier on, Robert Mueller was supposed to send an FBI investigation team to Porton Down to test whether the Ames strain of the virus, of the bacteria, had actually been leaked or filtered out by a rogue scientist. But he had to pull that meeting off, and the FBI never visited Porton Down, which would be a number one suspect in the attack, because the anthrax had been weaponized to increase its dispersivity in a way that was only be available to a very sophisticated lab like Porton Down. Over to you.
One more question before we go. How do you account for the increased importance of GCHQ, British intelligence, in the world? I mean, I think they played a major role with all this Russiagate. I think, in fact, they were the instigators, the ones who convinced Brennan to go along with this whole Russiagate plan. That's my theory. But at any rate, what accounts for the increased ascendancy or involvement or interference of GCHQ, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, it's been very successful. And when there is a whistleblower, a witness who's getting in the way, like Gareth Williams, the spy in the bag, right? He was supposed to have hacked into Clinton's diary, which would presumably indicate how many visits he's having with underage children, Grace, to Ghislaine Maxwell. And so he ends up allegedly locking himself in a bag where the padlock has no fingerprints. The bag is placed in a bath in his house in the UK. It's midsummer, right? So they turn up the heat. So he's disappeared for about 5 days. They've sprinkled stuff on his body. To answer your question, I think GCHQ is really coming into its own because it now has a complete control over the United States Patent Office through the British company Serco. So it can select any kind of technology, put any combination together, do a hit, retreat into the woodwork, and arrange for the BBC World Service to pump fake news into 20 languages around the world. Over to you.
Yeah, I think Dr. Corsi has just opened the can on the entire research library of David Hawkins, and I think you'd be quite intrigued to hear more about it, Doctor. Perhaps in the future we could have a guest appearance, either you on your show or
I'd be happy to.
He on yours. Well, David, that's wonderful, and thank you so much for joining us here on Christmas. It's wonderful to see you, and people can watch your show every Friday. David Hawkins Discovery CSI on Patreon and Subscribestar.
Thank you. It looks very festive, so Merry Christmas to you all.
Merry Christmas. All the best.
Great
Thank you.
to see you, David. Have a great day.
Bye now.
Thank you. Well, there you go. Finally, you guys get to meet David Hawkins.
Great.
Wonderful. Yeah. So we are close to the end of our special. There are a few more people who we're going to have call in, but, being the holiday, it's tough to kind of nail people down. I've been texting behind the scenes here while we're going, but I thought you'd be intrigued by that.
Very interesting.
With the Anna Chapman and the poisoning and everything. We're running close to the end of our time here. Okay, great. So Lee Stranahan is ready to join us now.
And as it gets on here, there's going to be more activity and noise in the house because there'll be a party tonight. So
Should we
just
close that door?
Close the door there, Jason.
Sure,
but
you got it.
But the house is now officially in the hands
Party
of,
mode, right?
of
So
the
we'll
party.
try and wrap this up pretty soon.
Well, we can keep going as long as you don't mind the noise.
Yep.
And I'm not going to do anything to stop the noise because the agreement was 4 o'clock. The house is theirs.
Yes. Just bring in Lee here. Okay, he's ready to join us. And I think you've both met Lee before.
Sure.
Oh, yes.
In person.
Yep.
I don't think we've met in person.
Okay, Lee, are you with us?
I sure am. Hey.
Wonderful. Okay, we don't have a camera on you yet.
Wait, hang on.
Merry Christmas, Lee.
There we go. Hey, how's it going, Jason?
Very, very well. I'm here with Dr. Corsi and Charles Ortel.
Hey, guys.
Hey,
How
Lee.
you doing?
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Great to
Are
see
we supposed
you.
to say Happy Holidays so we don't offend
No,
Jason,
Merry
or-
Christmas. We don't care about it. We're gonna do it the right way. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Yes, on Christmas we say Merry
We
Christmas.
still celebrate the birth of Christ.
Absolutely.
Well, we could say Happy Hanukkah.
We can say Happy
Oh,
Hanukkah.
yes, we'll say that
Merry
too.
Christmas,
That's also good.
And have a nice day.
But Happy Holidays.
I'm not sure what you guys talk about. I know Jason celebrates Kwanzaa.
Right, exactly. Along with Nancy Pelosi. We're having a big Kwanzaa party later, Lee. You're invited to that. So, Lee, you've been breaking incredible ground on Ukraine before it was cool to talk about Ukraine. And part of what I wanted to do for a Very Corsi Christmas was to really supercharge the crowdsourcing by getting a bunch of people together who I know are talking about things that are interrelated, but maybe aren't necessarily talking to each other. Lee, we had an explosive episode of High Dive with Lee Stranahan last week, and you found so much stuff just even on your trip to Oxford. Do you want to tell Dr. Corsi and Charles about that?
Yeah, sure. So I've had some time to think. It's you guys know what it's like. Sometimes you learn information and you know it's big, but then you realize you got to be able to explain it to people. So here's the short version. Cody Shearer is the longtime Clinton operative, who I'm sure you guys know who he is. He's worked for the Clintons since 1991, but he's known them since 1969. And he's the person who wrote the first dossier. And that dossier is mentioned, but it's not explicitly named on page 116 of the IOG report. But it's been well known. Jonathan Weiner admitted that he got the dossier from Sid Blumenthal who got it from Cody Scherer. He gave it to Steele, and that was sent to the FBI,
And
along
Lee,
with what we've learned.
Lee, I can independently verify that's exactly what happened. You're right. That did happen.
And the thing I learned from the IOG report, but this had been reported before too by a very bad reporter named Natasha Bertrand, but she had reported accurately that Steele had written, I got this from Sid Blumenthal and Cody Scherer, on the dossier when he sent it to the FBI. Now, Cody Scherer's brother is Derek Scherer. He's the former ambassador to Finland and has known Clinton again since 1968, 1969, because Derek Scherer was roommates at Yale with Strobe Talbot, and Strobe Talbot married Brooke Scherer, who was a longtime aide to Hillary Clinton later and stuff like that. But these guys go back as far as you can go to Clinton politically. And I think Dr. Corsi and Charles, you can bear. I mean, do you have anything to add on the Scherers before I?
No, except that you're exactly right. And by the way, I think that that's not attributed to the final versions of the Steele report. I don't remember their names being mentioned, but Cody Scherer and Blumenthal had their own independent competing dossiers. You're correct, and some of the information not only got in from them to the Steele dossier, but they were also feeding information, Blumenthal and Scherer, into the State Department through Weiner, who introduced it to this Victoria Nuland.
That's right. And the thing, I'll tell you my slightly alternative take on what happened.
Yes.
And it's based on knowing the way Sid Blumenthal works. So let's talk about how we know for a fact Sid Blumenthal works. I've had Larry Johnson, the former CIA analyst, on my radio show, Fault Lines, a few times now. And he worked with Blumenthal in 2007, 2008. And he told me the way Blumenthal works is that he will send a story out to multiple outlets. So, for instance, Johnson told me, Blumenthal said to him, hey, I found this, there's a rumor out there. Don't forget, this is when Hillary was running against Barack Obama. There's a rumor out there that Michelle Obama used the word whitey in a speech.
I remember that.
And Larry went to like 3 sources. And yep, this source said it, this source said it, and this source said it. Then he found out that Blumenthal had planted that with all 3 sources. So I'm sure the CIA, I have to talk to my CIA people, but there's probably a name for that. But basically, you throw the same material out here, here, and here. And then you get to go, see, we had multiple sources corroborating it. And and by the way, Larry told me 2 different cases where Blumenthal did this exact thing. So here's my theory. Blumenthal was planting material through the Scherer dossier, through the Steele dossier, and then what we know is later they're going, well, see, we had more than one source for it. It was independently corroborated. In particular, the now completely debunked Trump Hotel P-tape story, which we now know from the IOG report, it was a complete rumor. That was in both dossiers. And Lee Smith, who just put a book out about this stuff, he did a good report on Real Clear Investigations where he talked to a CIA guy in Colorado named Bear. He said that Scherer talked to him about this dossier in March or April, and we know that Steele wasn't even hired until June 20th. So what I'm saying is the Scherer dossier came first. It's not the second dossier. It's the first one. So here's what I found in Oxford. And I hadn't known this. Jonathan Weiner, central to this, because he handed the Scherer dossier to Steele, and among many other things. He's the attorney for Bill Browder, who's the guy who was at the center of the Trump Tower meeting. And the Trump Tower meeting, we know, and partially the way we know it is from Paul Manafort's notes, was about the Ziff brothers, who are the heirs to the Ziff Davis fortune, billionaires. They're like the 120th richest people in the world, and 3 brothers, and how they had been big investors with Browder in trying to steal shares of Gazprom, and at a time when Americans couldn't legally buy it, so they used shell companies, and apparently they didn't pay taxes in Russia or the U.S. That's what Natalia Veselnitskaya was talking about at the Trump Tower meeting, the Ziff brothers. So the thing that I found out was Derek Shearer worked for the Ziff brothers, and it's right on his resume at Occidental College. Furthermore, he works for what's called the McKinnon Center. Ian McKinnon's name is on that paperwork. He was with Ziff brothers for 20 years. So the Oxford thing here is that this guy, Ian McKinnon, who's, again, right at the center of what Natalia Veselnitskaya was actually, who I've interviewed, and Natalia's problem is she doesn't speak English, and she speaks very little. So I did an interview with her. It's about 40 minutes of material. It took about 2 hours, through no fault of anybody's. But everything I say had to be translated, and then she talks, and that has to be translated. So I can't imagine in the Trump Tower meeting, where it's apparently like 20 minutes long, there's no way anybody would have. But Manafort seemed to be picking it up, and so the fact that Derek Shearer, Shearer created this dossier, worked for Ziff Brothers, who is who they were trying to warn them about. That's exactly what this is about. And by the way, when you drill down the Ziff Brothers connections, they're huge, and a lot of very interesting Epstein connections to the Ziff Brothers as well, by the way. Yeah. So it started to paint in the picture for me. I'd never heard of Ian McKinnon. I went to Oxford, 46 Leckford Road, which is where Bill Clinton and Strobe Talbot lived. And on the way out there, it kind of focuses me. And I got pictures and stuff like that for a documentary I'm working on. But the main thing was it allowed me to focus on this. And I think this Derek Shearer story, like nobody's talking about Cody Shearer. His name was not even in the IOG report, although it's clear that's who they're talking about. And nobody's talking about Derek Shearer. And have either of you guys seen the letter that Derek Shearer wrote in 1993 to the Clintons?
No. What did he say?
I would recommend looking that up. It is one of the most amazing documents I've ever seen. What happened was Derek Shearer felt like after the Clintons had been elected that he'd been screwed by the Clintons. And so he sent a letter to, and it's on Occidental Stationery. It's amazing. And he sent it to Bill Clinton and to Hillary Clinton, along with an 8-page memo. And he goes into detail. He starts the letter by saying, I believe in political friendship as well as political debt. And he says, basically, you owe me. And he goes over the details of everything he did, working with Sid Blumenthal, writing speeches for Clinton, and he talks about how when the Jennifer Flowers story broke, Cody was in the room with you guys, and blah, blah, blah. He goes just on and on and on. It's an amazing document because it's exactly what everybody, and he was named ambassador to Finland 6 months later. And he says in the letter, I want this or this or this. That's what I want. And you owe me. And if anyone doubts this guy Derek Shearer is literally his father, Lloyd Shearer, was Walter Scott's Personality Parade in Parade magazine, 75 million readers. And he says, I've been planting stories for you with my father for years. He said, I've been boosting you. This is in 93. He says, I've been boosting you for president for 10 years. And he details everything they've done, dirty tricks, going after fellow Democrats like Jerry Brown, going after Ross Perot. It's amazing. So that's a document. People can look up Derek Shearer letter to Clinton. They'll probably be able to find it quickly. But it's amazing because you very rarely see people that honest, you know.
Well, Lee, I've got a new book coming out for this first quarter called Coup d'etat, and I've focused on Cody Shearer and his role in the Steele dossier and this Magnitsky Act, which is at the heart of the meeting, the Trump Tower meeting. And to me, the whole purpose of that meeting was that Veselnitskaya, however you say her name, you said it much better than I do, the Russian agent, who was the meeting was arranged for her to meet with Trump's team, presents a 4-page memo, and the memo is about the Magnitsky Act. And what they want is they want Trump to remove the sanctions in order that they can stop they start talking about the adoption of Russian children, which is blocked by this Magnitsky Act, all the repercussions of this Magnitsky Act and the sanctions. Of course, that's all about Browder and the money Browder stole out of Russia, which is still sticking in Putin's craw. Magnitsky was his lawyer, as you know, who ended up
he wasn't a lawyer, he was an accountant.
Accountant, that's right, accountant, yes, you're right, accountant. But it seemed to me the purpose of that meeting was to plant that document with Kushner and with Donald Trump Jr., because that was part of this quid pro quo they were trying to set up. In other words, you go steal the emails, Russia, which Russia I don't think ever did. I think that was Seth Rich. I always have. But then in return, we'll get repealed the Magnitsky Act, and these sanctions will go away. And that was the quid pro quo. Now, at the end of that meeting, because Manafort left and they all got angry at it because it was set up under false pretenses, Donald Trump Jr. refused to take the memo. So they did not plant that memo that they planned to, but I think that was the whole purpose of that meeting. And I'm pretty well convinced that was a Blumenthal-Shearer plot.
I don't agree at all, and I've interviewed Veselnitskaya. That narrative only benefits one person, Bill Clinton. That is the only person who benefits from that narrative.
How does it benefit Bill? Yeah, tell me.
I'll tell you who else it benefits. It also benefits John McCain, Joe Biden, and Barack Obama. And by the way, the reason I say that is, if you look at the people who are pro-Magnitsky Act, all of them are the biggest anti-Clinton people you can name. The Magnitsky Act in the Senate was introduced by John McCain. The Magnitsky Act mentions Mikhail Khodorkovsky, who is Putin's, who hates Putin and wants revenge because Putin shut down his theft. The Khodorkovsky 322, Senate Resolution 322, was sponsored by McCain. Sponsored by Biden. Two co-sponsors, McCain and Obama. This is the anti-Putin side. The anti-Putin side is that. What Veselnitskaya was trying to do was tell them the truth. And if anybody doubts this, read Der Spiegel's new article on Bill Browder and read what he says in response to it. This is the first time, the biggest cover-up right now. That Trump Tower meeting was completely 100% valid. And the idea that anything was going on nefarious in that. The Magnitsky Act is a complete fraud. It is based on a lie, and was designed only to benefit the wealthy oligarchs like Khodorkovsky, who were stealing Russia blind in the 1990s. But I'll go over anything about that with you. But.
So what do you think the purpose of the meeting was, and what was she trying to accomplish? I mean, clearly she wanted the act repealed.
She was in town because she was working in the Prevezon case,
right?
Which again, complete fraud. And all they have to do is I posted the deposition of Todd Hyman. Todd Hyman deposition. Look it up on YouTube. It's only about 2 hours. He admits that all of the information the government had for that case came from one person, Bill Browder. All of it. Then go watch Bill Browder deposition on YouTube. 6.5 hours, a little longer, but you'll see he does not have any proof for anything that he did. So she was in town to work in the Prevezon case, which was a complete complete fraud, shakedown. And because on June 14th, Dana Rohrabacher and some other people, they were going to have supposedly some debate or discussion on the Magnitsky Act. Andrei Nekrasov, who directed a film called Magnitsky Act Behind the Scenes, he was in town. They were going to go into D.C. That meeting got shut down. Veselnitskaya was not allowed to testify. Now she's under indictment because they want to keep her out of the country. They don't want people to know the truth about this. The purpose of it was to stop. These are rich elitists who do not care if they drive two nuclear-powered nations to war if they can make a few $1 billion. So they have ginned up tensions completely artificially between the United States and Russia, completely artificially, on completely false grounds. That anybody, I challenge anybody to watch. I mean, Browder, when I say he wasn't his lawyer, Magnitsky wasn't his lawyer, Browder admits in the deposition, he says, oh, he was my lawyer. Did he have a law degree? No. Did he pass the bar? Did he go to law school? No. No. He's not his lawyer. He admits it, but then he goes, well, he was my lawyer. But everything throughout the thing, this is the biggest scam. The thing I've been saying for a long time is, if you're trying to understand Russiagate, you got to understand Trump wasn't the primary target. The United States' relationship with Russia was, and it's by people, and all of these people, the people right at the center of this, and now we have it with the Ziff Brothers thing that I found with Derek Shearer, were people who were profiting from the theft of Russian assets after the fall of the Soviet Union, under Clinton, under Jonathan Weiner, under Larry Summers, who's deeply connected to Epstein. This is the group of people who were stealing Russia blind, and now they want to go back and keep doing it.
Yeah.
Fascinating, Lee. That's fascinating stuff. We'll have to look into some of that.
Absolutely explosive. Lee, we're going to have to get you onto an episode with Dr. Corsi or Sunday with Charles, or get a little cross-pollination going. But Lee, I think we've overstayed our welcome here at Casa Corsi. There's a party that's being developed here in the background, so wanted to thank you.
I was hoping I'd get my present.
Well, I think you got your present with all that Oxford trip. You think?
Well, no, I appreciate you guys letting me talk. Thanks. So
much. Lee, we always enjoy it. You do great work, and we love your work, and God bless you, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, God bless you guys. Merry Christmas. Thanks a lot. See you, Jason.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the next episode of High Dive with Lee Stranahan. So that was a great little call from Lee. I think we're out of time. There were a few other callers that I had lined up, but of course on Christmas, Dr. Corsi, it's difficult to get all the logistics worked out. Thank you so much for having us in your home.
It's been a great pleasure, and I see the dog has come to join us.
Yeah.
The dog's made a little cameo appearance from time to time.
Anything you guys would like to say?
No, I think it's been great. Thank you guys for coming over, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, and thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Jason, for all the work you've done to put this together.
Well, it's my pleasure, Dr. Corsi. It's been a very Corsi Christmas, and I hope that everybody's enjoyed watching it and is having a great Christmas with their families, and we're looking forward to 2020.
God bless everybody, and remember, in the end, God always wins.